Hey, Detoxers. Welcome to another episode of the Disinfo Detox, where media literacy meets the headlines. We are the Media Literacy Wrecking Crew. I'm Nolan Higdon, joined as always by our resident philosopher, Dickey.
What's up, detoxers?
And of course, Sydney Sullivan as well.
Hey there, detoxers.
Well, I want to kick things off today talking about a couple different things in the digital world. I guess we can start in the kind of digital world of politics and social media before we get into AI here. But I don't know if you guys noticed, but Gavin Newsom seems to have really changed his online profile in terms of his social media use, really kind of mimicking almost, Donald Trump in 2015. And it caught the attention of Fox News, who's now recording segments where they look down on Gavin Newsom for supposedly being childish on social media, as if their network didn't support Donald Trump for the last 10 years for doing the same thing. But yeah, the right is basically trying to shame Newsom, saying that like these tweets he's doing that are trolling President Trump and Republicans are, beneath American politics. And to me, it kind of rings a lot of what Democrats were saying about Trump in 2015. Now Republicans are saying it here. But I'm kind of more interested in what you think about this says about the role of social media and the nature of today's politics. Because, for folks who don't remember 2015, like the ways in which we call people names in our politics or we troll them online, like that was never something elected officials did. Trump started that. There was a lot of shock amongst people who respected the norms, the so-called normies around that. But I wonder if you think here with Gavin, being such a powerful figure from a high, from a wealthy Democratic state with a high profile, I don't know. What do you think? Is this the new normal now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it very well is, or very well maybe. I mean, certainly, as you said, Nolan. The Democrats were always critical of this sort of hyperbolic flame war type of. They're all about process and decorum. But now that someone as high profile as Gavin Newsom has kind of normalized it, and I'm sure many people are like, finally, a Democrat who's going to fight. Just we want someone who fights. Like it really is kind of setting the tone for the new age, the new epoch, which in some ways is yeah, I mean, I'm one for not following strict decorum rules, but it also does just kind of make it a spectacle and less about issues, less about solutions, and more about just getting the burn. Um, is it good for our society to perpetuate more hate between more us versus them mentality? And I don't know, this kind of might lead into that, and it can be a dark path that we're going down. But it definitely seems like the at least this wave of mainstream politicians. We'll see what happens in the younger generations. I think there's a lot of really I mean, this is a slightly different topic, but just there's a new wave of people running for office who are finding other ways to get support, which is maybe adopting a more economic populist agenda like Mamdani, or I just saw a guy in Maine, I'm forgetting his name, but they're just talking about kind of going against the oligarchy, which is getting a lot of support. So if you're not willing to have an economic populist agenda, I think that this is sort of a new way to get support for, at least for Democrats.
And
Mm.
before Sydney steps in, I just want to read some of these just for the audience. So this is one. Look, these are in all caps from Gavin's official government account. Dana Ding Dong Perino, parentheses, never heard of her until today, is melting down because of me, Gavin C. Newsom. In another one, all caps again. Fox hates that I'm America's most favorite governor. Ratings king, saving America, while Trump can't even conquer the big stairs on Air Force One anymore. Trump has lost his step and Fox is losing it because when I type, America now wins. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I
Mm.
mean, it's so on the nose Trumpian.
Yeah, it sounds very much like Trump.
Go ahead, Sydney.
Well, I think that's something that Newsom is realizing that Trump realized years ago was that there actually have, I'm going to talk about it during the media literacy moment today, but there is a lot of really great research out now on virality and what goes viral. And there's a lot to show us that it's not even just emotional content or triggering content like we once thought, but it's actually about in groups and out groups. And if you're criticizing an out group, that is actually the thing that makes you go the most viral. It is criticizing an opponent of yours or criticizing someone that's not a part of your circle. And it kind of just contributes as well to in like social media studies, like what we call echo chambers, which is just like I exist in this bubble and what my values are echoed back to me, and I don't see the values of others. And if anything, the values and perceptions of others are criticized, and we reward that through going viral. And I think when we have things like voting and who's next for governor or who's next in an election, virality becomes one of the most important things that people can kind of hold on to or even need in their like political agenda.
Yeah, and that might be a good transition here because you were talking about kind of between the two of you, young people and social media use. And there was this clip on CNN which we can play here.
This is a huge decline. Americans who drink alcohol, we are looking at the lowest level since the 1930s. What are we talking about? Just 54% on occasion Americans say that they drink alcohol. That's down from 4 points last year. That's down from 62% in 2023. And it is way down from the record high the last year that happened when it was 71% back in 1978. This record low is being driven by younger folks and Republicans as well, as they increasingly view the idea of drinking as an unhealthy habit.
The poll also asked about smoking. What did that show?
Yeah, same exact idea. It turns out we're giving up our vices a little bit. What are we talking about? Smoked a cigarette in the last week. Look at this. In 2025, just 11%. A decade ago, it was 19%. 2 decades ago, 25%. You look back 1974, about 50 years ago, it was 40%. What is that? That's 1/4 the level. My goodness gracious. And again, younger folks are the ones who are saying that they are smoking less. And even when you combine in e-cigarettes, we're still looking at considerably lower levels than we have in past decades.
And people watching are also going to see this tab. And you're saying that people are giving up vices, and you think sex is a vice?
I'm not saying that sex is a vice. According to some people, perhaps it's a vice. It is not a vice according to the Harry Enton school of thought. But bow chickie wow wow going down. What are we talking about? No sex at all in the last year as Kate's off on the side laughing it up.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not laughing.
She's doing something.
Sure.
She's not even sure.
I'm blushing under all of this makeup.
She's blushing. There we go. In the 1990s, among all adults, no sex at all in the last year was 18%. In 2024, look at that. No sex at all. Up again, 10 points. Look at here. Those 18 to 21, look at that. 24% in the 1990s. It's the younger folks who are giving up sex. Look at that percentage. Doubled no sex in the last year. Maybe they do need a little bit of alcohol. Maybe those two are related.
They didn't really directly say this at CNN, but I've heard these numbers in previous studies, and it's really celebrated by conservative America. But I noticed a couple of commentators, Kyle Kalinske in particular, pointed out that, yeah, but what about like other vices they're replacing it with? So what about zines? What about vaping? What about like screen time, video games, pornography, all these other kind of addictions that are replacing or vices, I guess, are replacing what we see here. And of course, this to me, kind of brought up the big difference we've seen between, the Gen Z, the folks who were raised in this digital social media environment versus the previous generations, which had some memory of a pre-smartphone environment. So I wonder what you kind of, I don't know, what do you make of these stats when we look at where America's going with these vices in general and for young people in particular? And let me just actually add one more thing too. This also is occurring at a time when there was a study on AI. So a lot of these young people are also using AI. And one study found that 80% of Gen Zers said they were open to the idea of marrying AI. About 2/3 use it for advice on romance and mental health as well. So I think the picture I'm kind of painting here with some of these stats is a generation that really is going more and more to the screen and digital environment, and previous sort of in-person vices like, smoking with friends, drinking with friends, having sex with humans. Those seem to be reducing. What do you guys make of that?
Yeah, I actually saw an interview about this, and they ran the stats and the facts with Jonathan Haidt, and they did a really great interview. But one of the things Haidt was talking about, that I'll kind of share my opinion on in a minute, is that all of these things are happening perhaps because people aren't out in the world anymore. Like, yes, they're not drinking, they're not smoking, but it's because they're on their phones and they're inside. What I think that kind of leaves out of the picture is this overall perception of health. Is it bad that, do we want people to go outside and continue drinking more? It's kind of this really big trade off you do. And something I think about when it comes to screen time usage as well is we used to, for example, read more. That is in itself a form of escapism. Is reading more and being on your phone the same kind of escapism? A lot of research would say no. So that kind of gets into like the nuance of what kind of escapism you're using, what kind of vices you're using, and how those play into your overall well-being. I think it's difficult to say like, oh, the way things were working or the way I would do things 10 or 15 years ago is better than the vices that are being used today. I think when you look at like an overall picture of well-being, it becomes more complicated. So I think what I struggle with like those numbers is that yes, they paint a picture that looks concerning, but is it concerning like in the overall scheme of what we see as like societal mental well health and well-being? Like when people are getting too lonely, for example, is that due to cell phone usage, or do we need to kind of interfere elsewhere?
Yeah, I would sort of agree that the digital devices may not be to blame, but always my kind of critique for folks who I know you're not doing this, but for other folks who try and um, escape like the blame for digital devices or the change in trends, right? What we see this in education a lot, where we'll complain about some of the changes in education, and they'll say, "No, it's just because you were used to a different way."
Mm,
I think if you're making the change, I think the uh, what do you call it? The pressure is on you to make the case that things have gone in a better direction as a result of said change. Instead, we always
mm,
put it on the person who's complaining about the change. But if you think the cell phone use is not doing anything or moving in a positive direction, I think that data needs to be shown. They always put the emphasis on the person complaining. And
mhm,
like, it's interesting to me that we have so much coverage in our news media and across higher education about how there's a mental health crisis, but then there's a big defense about not blaming the digital devices for a mental
mm,
health crisis.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
think Jonathan Haidt does a good job of. That's why I'm glad he cited him. He does kind of a good job, I think, of navigating that. But you know what I
mm.
mean about kind of that discrepancy.
Yeah, I think the difficulty, like as like the research shows, and we had Pete Etchells on here earlier who kind of says the same thing about like when you do a deeper dive into this research, it's really, really difficult to pinpoint something onto social media or something onto cell phone usage, especially when it comes to, let's say, for example, oh, when you're sleeping, does cell phone usage cause issues with sleep? Yes, but like when you get into the science, it's like an extra 2 minutes a night that you lose sleep. So is that really like the impact that we're looking for? Or is it something more nuanced than that? So it's really, really difficult, I feel like, because there is either so little research on it or the research isn't kind of like pointing towards the correct things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that at some level.
Yeah, I this is a really interesting conversation, and I mean, I remember reading Jonathan Haidt's work when we just had smartphones, and was talking a lot about sort of the unknown. Like now we're getting the data on the unknown unknowns of the technology, how it's affecting younger people or even older people, but certainly the youth who are sort of in this developmental phase, and so yeah, very curious to see the research that continues to come out. But yeah, I think like as Cindy, you said nuance, and I think that there is a lot of nuance here. And when you dig in, yeah, it can go in there's positive directions and negative directions. That's just technology. It's not nefarious. It's not malevolent or benevolent. It's just kind of how it is used in the culture around it. Um and so when some of the stats or the research that we have seems to really blame the individual, and I think a lot of it is societal, cultural. We're more inside. We're not as connected. That is certainly a personal choice we're making to remain on our screens, but we're also in a society that doesn't invest in community space the way it used to.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that it goes, they're playing together. It goes hand in hand. So it'll be interesting to see what, as the research comes out, and then how we respond as a society in that regard.
But I think, I mean, this is where I would almost push back on some of Pete's work too on this. That this is where I think that the structure matters. I know he was really putting his flag in the idea that it doesn't count as clinical addiction, and that's fine. But I mean, there's a long debate about that goes back to like Dana Boyd's work, and I think Gene Twenge has covered some of this, and others. But still the idea, there are plenty of data-driven studies that show how the structures of these platforms are designed to keep people on the screen. Even internal studies from Facebook have shown that their own content creates mental health issues, particularly amongst young people, body dysmorphia in girls in their teenage years in particular. So the structure of these systems and the direct effect, I think, is well documented. I think that the missing piece, and this kind of gets to what Dickey said, and this is why I think people are reticent to draw this line, because they don't like to interrogate corporate power. As Dickey said, a cell phone itself is it's not harmful. It's just like a hammer, right? It's not harmful. It depends on how you use it. And I think that the problem is we've allowed them for corporate co-optation, that very narrowly use them to keep people addicted to their screens, to extract data, to play the lowest common denominator. We were just talking about how one of our videos went viral because it was 30 seconds. I mean, you have a public that is conditioned to believe anything more complex than a 30-second soundbite is something that is above their head. And I think those are kind of things that have been come from the cultural use of these that are contributing to some of the problems we're talking about here.
Yeah, I could get on board with that for sure. I think it's a similar issue to the environment where it's like, why can't you recycle more? And it's like, well, what about all these big companies that are like, buying out oil, or, it's
Yeah,
that
that's a
kind
good
of
call.
balance of you're blaming an individual, but at the same time, there's these bigger factors and companies in play too. Yeah.
God, dude, the environmental example is such a good one. That is one of like my biggest just pet peeves. Like all the meaningless like feel good things we do at the individual level for the environment, while the real like macro problem just
Yeah,
continues to persist in the wrong direction.
love it.
Um, but I have green shoes.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Should we move on from that? Are we done with AI and social media? We can come back.
Always.
Yeah. All right. So this next piece was written by Forrest Rom and Kevin Waldman of Northwestern University. And they write, quote, "On today's college campuses, students are not maturing, they're managing. Beneath a facade of progressive slogans and institutional virtue signaling lies a quiet psychological crisis driven by the demands of ideological conformity." And this study they did between 2023 and 25 was conducted on nearly 1,500 confidential interviews with undergraduates at Northwestern University and the University of Michigan. They were not there, the researchers, to study politics. Their main question was, have you ever pretended to hold more progressive views than you truly endorse to succeed socially or academically? And an astounding 88% of the students said yes. These students said they were mostly not cynical, but adaptive. In a campus environment where grades, leadership, and peer belonging often hinge on fluency and performative morality, young adults quickly learn to rehearse what is safe. And
Mm.
so that was their conclusion. I think this study is still preliminary. I don't think that the data has been made available, but they went ahead and printed an op-ed write-up of it in The Hill, which folks can read. I don't know. These, we've been in academia. Some of us taught in academia. We've all been students in academia. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a really complex, and it's a good discussion to have, because it's certainly, as a student, I have yet to be on the other side of it. But just in a student, yeah, you don't, in group discussions, and I try to show up with goodwill in all that I do the best I can. I believe in ethics and stuff, and so I really do cherish the value of, yeah, sort of inclusion and safe space, but not in like a um, snowflake type of way. Just the psychological safety and being aware of what people are carrying. But it does come into it kind of plays into a self, or like I'm not necessarily self-censoring, but I'm checking in with myself. Oh, can I say this? It doesn't uh there is a fear, it might just be sort of the extreme examples that we've had of cancel culture over the last like decade or so, where there's this kind of ambient threat of like, oh, if I say that wrong thing, am I going to get exiled? Am I allowed to be wrong in public? And I yeah, I think that this to be, the idea of being in a vibrant kind of pluralistic society, um, we need the avenues and the sort of places where we're allowed to be wrong, and then we also can like make sense in common together. And um, like how is should the university be the place where you can we're saying where you can kind of workshop this and like learn how um, to sort of create to develop your mind, rather than just sort of curate an identity that falls into yeah, kind of this ideological homogeny. And um, I yeah, I think it's really really fascinating. Talks about, are we performing in our communities, or are we actually participating in them? And
Mm.
um, does and then when I really start thinking about it, I'm like, oh, is this creating like a split in ourselves of like our public, how we show up in public, and then how we show up in private?
Mm.
And yeah, those are some of these loose thoughts I had, but it's interesting. I appreciate the conversation. Yeah, I'm not yeah, I'm curious to hear what y'all think about it.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what Dickey said, especially like a cancel culture situation or the difficulties of like navigating these kinds of topics in the classroom. One of the first things I learned when I went to grad school for my education degree was why people not only go to school, but why they drop out of school. And the number one like reason people will leave during their first year is a lack of peer support. So this idea of like having peer support, having peer relationships is so vital to your success in school. It was so interesting to me because I would have immediately thought, like, oh, if you're first gen or have good grades or bad grades, but it was so much about relationships. And you see that same concept when it comes to debates too. There's a really great study that came out a couple years ago about, do debates change minds politically? And they said no. In fact, the things that change people's minds are relationships, and relationships with people who think differently than we do. And so I really like that they did this study, because I think it reaffirms those points more, that like relationships are so foundational, not only to our political beliefs, but to how we function in a society, how we move forward through education. I know that education, for example, has been accused of, indoctrinating students with democratic beliefs for years. But I also wonder if it's almost a product of these peer relationships as well, and wanting to fit in, and rather less about the teachers. That would be a good study to do, is if it's more about our peers or more about the teachers and what we're teaching. But I really like that a lot. Yeah.
It gives, I totally agree, by the way. And it gives some more support to what you're saying there, Sydney, as well. In addition, is they did a study a couple years ago, and it was something like, I think it was 90% of faculty identify as liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways folks read that was like, well, if you're educated, you become liberal. But I read it a slightly different way. That kind of why I like what these two authors are talking about here from Northwestern. I always kind of looked at the diversity statement, which has been used prominently for the last few decades in higher education, as a homogeneity statement. It was looking for a very specific ideology who saw the world a very specific way, who saw diversity in a very specific way. And this is like a side debate, but there's a difference between being pro-diversity, which means you welcome a diversity of views and identities and backgrounds and experiences, versus diversity ideology, which is this belief that if you diversify those in power, the gains from those in power will trickle down to people who share those identity. And I think the diversity ideology is what they were looking for in those statements. And so why I say that is, if you filter out people who don't have that ideology for a handful of decades, that becomes the faculty. So the students have a homogeneity of views from the faculty. The campus has a homogenized view, and I think it hurts. Honestly, this isn't mocking the left; it's talking about it hurts the left. I think that's why they were caught so off guard by Trumpism, so off guard by the disdain for the Democratic Party from 2016 on forward, the reality of frustration in this country economically. Like, all those things are just not in higher ed. And the response, why this study resonates with me, the response from my colleagues in higher ed was to basically just dismiss anybody who was open or had supported Donald Trump. They openly talked at faculty meetings about, like, yeah, these Trumpers, aren't welcome here. You can't change their minds. I'm like, we're an educational institution. I got into education because education changes minds. That's the whole thing. Like, what do you mean you can't reach these people? And so I think this study is, I think students are always intelligent. They can always pick up and read a room for the most part. And I think students, figured it out. Like, oh yeah, all these faculty, get their jollies off when we talk about how much we love Kamala and our disdain for MAGA, and that can help advance my career. So be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe it is time for Dickey.
Yeah. Yes. I usually we've done the truth or troll game here, and I love truth or troll. We can definitely play that again, but I wanted to try a new game out that I'm working with, and if y'all want to be the guinea pigs, I would
Let's
love
do it.
to.
We're ready.
All right, yeah, I would love to take you through the archives, I guess, and play this game called "When Was This Headline?" And the way we'll play is I will read a real headline, and Sydney and Nolan will have to guess. I was thinking which decade it was published in,
Okay.
and I'll give you bonus points and then you can have bragging rights, of course, if you nail the exact year.
Ooh.
I'm fired up, Sydney. You ready?
I feel like we should start getting prizes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You want some like lollipops or something? Okay. Yes. So let's do this. When was this headline? We're fighting fake news AI bots by using more AI. That's a mistake. Oh, sorry. Nolan. When was this headline?
Gosh, is it oh God, it seems so obvious. Is it the 2020s?
Yes, it is. It is exactly 2020. So this was but January 8th, 2020 is when this came out, and I found it kind of interesting that pre-Chat GPT, there was, I mean, so AI, we didn't have the chat bots, but there was still AI, like bots creating news on Facebook. This was, I believe, in the sort of context of this article was really about how Facebook was rolling out AI tools to fight misinformation, but it wasn't, ChatGPT did not hit the sort of public use that it has now. But I just found it interesting that 5 years ago, there's like this headline of tech is going to save us from tech, and we're sort of kind of still stuck in that loop a little bit.
Those naive people in 2020, they thought, oh, AI won't be, it's not coming for a while.
Right?
The pandemic and Black Plague are things in history books.
Yeah. So okay, that's 1 point for Nolan. All right, this is okay. So Sydney, when was this headline? ChatGPT smeared me with false sexual harassment charges.
I assume the 2020s. You want to exact date, 2023.
You're spot on.
Woo!
Yeah, that was a good guess. I know that ChatGPT it definitely located us in a certain decade, but I couldn't, I was kind of looking through headlines, and the fact that ChatGPT, smeared me. Basically, it was a law professor who the ChatGPT had hallucinated a sexual harassment charge when someone else had inquired about sexual harassment at this university that the professor taught at. And I think it was maybe 2 episodes ago, or I can't remember how many, but we just had talked about AI hallucinations.
Yeah.
Um, Getting even more serious in ChatGPT. So, this headline was 2023 and we're in 2025, and there are many headlines about how even though it gets more advanced, it hallucinates more um as it goes on. And I think it really made me think about this AIs perhaps it's a bit of a pipe dream, we're
Mm.
being sold that there's innovation and progress, but like 2 years down the line and it's still hallucinating, if not like more.
Yeah.
um,
It's almost like it's not intelligent.
Almost like it's not intelligent.
What?
Funny how that might be the case. Um, okay, all right. So this, yeah, okay. So I have a headline. This will be for Nolan. It is "End of the World." What um, what decade? What year did that come out?
That's the whole headline.
That's the whole headline.
Would it be in the? Oh man. Gosh, I got two guesses here. Is it in the 40s?
It is technically in the 40s, um, but it is in 1840.
Oh no, it's definitely going. Oh, was this William Miller?
Yes, the Millerites.
Oh,
Great disappointment. So
some of
that
my
was, well,
favorite history stories too. Gosh.
yeah. No, October 22nd, 1844. It was kind of like one of the first mass media coverages of, I guess, what we'd call the rupture nowadays, but it came to be known as the Great Disappointment because this was the day that everyone, sort of spearheaded by William Miller, believed that Jesus was going to return, and nothing happened that day. So it became known as the Great Disappointment. But this headline still resurfaces. Literally, I think it was like 2012, we had the rupture with
Yeah.
the Mayan calendar. I found,
What I thought it was gonna be was that one.
yeah, well, so as I was looking through, headlines, I found a Time magazine cover from January 1999 that literally says um, "The End of the World" as well, and it was in reference to Y2K, which
Mm.
hadn't thought about that in a while.
That and
But
that William Miller. So I was way off. I was thinking of the War of the Worlds broadcast.
Mm.
I couldn't remember if it was late 30s, early 40s. But the William Miller, that was his fourth time predicting the end of the world. People turned out four times. The dude was
Wow.
like a great con man, who was able to get folks out four times for the end of the world. That is so funny you pulled that out.
yeah,
So
yeah,
mad at
and
myself.
I mean, he was trying it. I mean, seems like a real believer, but
You would
and
have
so,
done
yeah.
so well in the age of social media.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly it. We kind of see this. I mean, it's not necessarily headlines, but so many viral tweets go on about, and sometimes it is sincere, like it might be about climate change or something, but a lot of the time it seems to be clickbait. Just it is something that catches your attention and always sells. Um, okay, and so for this next section, I'm gonna it's kind of more rapid fire. I'm gonna read a headline, and I don't want you to overthink it too much. I just like, when do you think this came out? So we'll start with Sydney. When was this headline? Pilot sees saucer-like objects flying at 1,200 miles per hour in Oregon.
2000s.
That was 1947.
Ooh.
All right,
Yeah, I was going
Nolan.
50. Okay.
How about citizens put credibility online, report UFO sightings?
2024.
This was 1984.
Wow.
How about strange light in the sky? This one's for you, Sydney.
1960s?
1897. And let's do
I want to read all these.
yeah, spherical UFO is seen hovering over New Jersey. When was this, Nolan?
Is that 2024?
That is 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few. I got like 5 other headlines all throughout the basically a couple. The earliest one I could find was the 1897, and then there's one in the 40s and the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and yeah, there was just I think it was Joe Rogan, one of the representatives in Florida, Representative Luna or something. She was on Joe Rogan saying, I have seen definitive proof that there's UFOs. Kind of, we're re-entering that discussion again. And I'm a total like I love the X-Files. I want to believe, but this like this, the repetition of the story, it's not like the headlines aren't from a single moment. They're just, it's across time and space. And it just really, it just seems more and more that the UFO storyline has a kind of utility to it, and it's like a deflection, like a don't look here, look over there type of thing. And I was just, it's never, I mean, I'm sure tomorrow we'll get some, or in a year we'll get more headlines, and there's probably some even earlier than 1897. But just this kind of keeping people curious, and uncertain, and never really confirming or denying.
When was the headline? I like that segment, Dickey. We're gonna have to do that one again.
Yes.
All right. It must mean it's media literacy moment time.
It is. We're ready. Okay, so I did say I was going to talk about virality, which I am. So essentially, I want people to think about, like, if you've ever wondered why a post goes viral and why others just quietly disappear into the online universe. So research by psychologist Steve Rothschild really sheds light on this, and Rothschild did an interview not so long ago about this as well. But in study analyzing thousands, if not millions, of social media platforms. And they went and did kind of a meta-analysis as well from US politicians and partisan news outlets. Rothschild's team found that the strongest predictor of virality was not emotion or moral outrage, but rather posts criticizing the other side or your political opponents were far more likely to be shared than posts praising your in-group. So, in fact, each additional word about the political out group would increase shares by 67%. Huge. So, even more striking about the work was revealed a phenomenon that Rothschild called the paradox of virality. While people recognize that diverse content spreads like wildfire online, the vast majority actually don't want that kind of content to go viral. So, there's really the media literacy tip of the day that I have is when something is polarizing or adversarial and it starts to spread like crazy, I want people to pause and ask yourself, is this gaining traction because it is meaningful or because it is polarizing? And I think that that can help ground people in a reality again and allow them to kind of assess from there.
I like it, Sydney. I like this connection to with what we were talking about earlier. I think that's helpful for folks to recognize from a media literacy perspective how virality is kind of baked into the cake of the online experience, even if you're not trying to get viral. Like what you see and how you access it is really shaped by that, right?
Yeah, well, and I love the paradox of virality that they did a follow up on, which is that people, like individual people, don't want that content to go viral. I found that really fascinating because obviously it kind of goes back to that idea we have of like the individual versus the company, and like what we want isn't maybe being reflected or valued in the spaces that we're using.
Yeah. Plus, especially when you have something go viral, dude, like the hate mail. I mean, it's just.
Hate mail.
I mean, I'm entertained by it. Like that. So, I mean, I shouldn't say this publicly because now it'll be used against me. But like, when people write personal attacks, that doesn't bother me because I'm like, I think that stuff is like funny. I'm just annoyed that they spend the time doing it. But like, what your one fear whenever you publish something is that you got something wrong. So I always like looking. That's the email that would scare me. The one that like points out like an error or something.
Oh yeah,
But the
fair.
personal attacks are just eye rolls. Yeah. All right. Well, that was the media literacy moment from our media literacy expert here, Sydney Sullivan. And that must mean it's sidebar time.
Yes, yes. Welcome to the sidebar, where we take that sharp left turn into something weird, wild, and worrying. And this week, like many weeks, the thing that has me worried is AI. And I keep asking myself, like, how much darker can AI really get? We've seen that AI chatbots push vulnerable users deep into psychosis, or even deny the Holocaust, or convince people they're the second coming of Christ. And now there are pedobots. A Reuters investigation exposed that Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, had internal policies allowing its AI chatbot to engage in sensual conversations with children. And the document, which was approved by Meta's legal team and their team of engineers and their chief ethicist, it spelled out examples of what the company considered acceptable role play with minors. In one hypothetical case, the chatbot could generate responses that framed an 8-year-old's body and language that described their appearance as radiant and precious and cherished. And in another, it was the situation was that of a high schooler asking about evening plans. The chatbot was allowed to escalate that conversation into an explicitly romantic scenario of taking their hand, leading them to bed, and whispering declarations of eternal love. And this was not a programming glitch. This was a feature, an actual policy. Meta even confirmed the document's authenticity, but then scrambled to delete the sections and claimed that these interactions never should have happened. But it was only after Reuters had caught them. And so this just represents the latest disturbing chapter in how predatory the AI boom has become. But AI has always been marketed as a salvation, sort of packaged with these grand promises of exponential growth in intelligence and wealth, productivity, energy, even life itself. But really, the only exponential growth has been in its perils. When AI data centers are built, they've been devouring the ecosystems, draining the rivers. Human workers are being pushed aside while tech companies raid entire libraries of art, music, and speech to feed their models. The technology is being forced into classrooms, replacing teachers, and to hospitals where algorithmic cruelty takes the place of good medical judgment. Surveillance states are metastasizing into even more monstrous machines of control, and that's supercharged by AI. Those same powers are then continuing to stoke endless wars and turn entire regions into testing grounds for AI weapons. So every promise of liberation really has become another tool for human destruction. But perhaps a reckoning is finally at hand. The hype may be running out of steam because MIT just delivered a brutal reality check, finding that 95% of corporate AI programs are failing outright. These flashy pilot projects that are launched by major corporations are just burning through billions of dollars with little to show for it. The researchers found that these companies, they just throw money at sales and marketing and ignore the unglamorous areas where AI might actually add value. And so the result is years of hype, endless demos, and very few real results. The cracks don't stop just there. Expectations for ChatGPT 5 fell sharply when it actually launched somewhat recently. The users quickly deemed it overdue, overhyped, and underwhelming, noting that the model touted as the next great leap toward artificial general intelligence, or AGI, it still fails at basic tasks like correctly counting how many R's are in the word raspberry. So that flop makes all the AGI talk look embarrassing, less like destiny and more like marketing spin. Even Sam Altman himself is walking it back, recently telling CNBC that the term AGI doesn't carry that much weight anymore. He's even ratcheting up the caution, claiming that AI may already be in a bubble. He likens it to the dot-com boom of the 90s, a time when smart people got overexcited about a kernel of technological possibility. Which points to an almost inevitable conclusion. This AI bubble will burst, just like the others before it. And when it does, the financial carnage will be severe. But there may be a silver lining to the AI market collapse. It could take down the entire cathedral of tech accelerationist dreams that have been diminishing human flourishing. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be fortunate enough that these AI evangelists failed to complete their anti human project and we can reclaim what truly matters: our creativity, our labor, our communities, our whole world. But here's the catch: the same forces that created this AI dystopia will fight to control the story of what comes next after the potential collapse. They'll flood us with narratives about lessons learned and responsible AI, all while positioning themselves to capture whatever emerges. So, practicing media literacy means being ready for that moment, knowing how to separate fact from spin, how to interrogate the power behind the narrative, and how to detect what's really being sold to us. When we hone those skills, we can call bullshit the moment they try to sell us the same poison in a prettier bottle. So, stay sharp and stay curious out there, detoxers.
I love it.
So thank you so much for tuning into the Disinfo Detox. Please remember to hit that little bell and subscribe if you're on YouTube or whatever podcast platform. Also, give us a like and a comment. And if you can, click the Patreon link, become a subscriber for as little as $5 a month. You can come help support the show. We'll see you next time.
See you,
Bye.
detoxers.